Venezuela, the Vice President of the country, Delcy Rodriguez, and the Chinese Ambassador Lang Hu met to review the joint agenda and the challenges they are facing. In Haiti, at least 11 inmates of the St. Mark prison died in a mass jailbreak, the third so far this year in this country. And in Palestine, massacres by Israel's genocidal troops continue unabated. At least 15 people were killed in the Zawayda Refugee Camp. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belen de los Santos. I'm from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. On Friday, the Vice President of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, and the Chinese Ambassador Lang Hu met to review the joint agenda and the challenges that they are facing. According to the Executive Office, the development of joint relations have been reviewed and the bonds of friendship have been strengthened. The representatives of Caracas and Beijing examined recent agreements signed after the implementation of the special economic zones in the Bolivarian nation that will be destined to key sectors such as energy, agriculture, and technology. In recently published figures, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Venezuela put the commercial exchange with the Asian nation at $4,183 million. We stay in Venezuela as President Nicolás Maduro had to the working meeting for the communal consultation to be held on August 25th to strengthen democracy and national sovereignty. From the Miraflores Palace, the president informed that next August 25th, popular elections will be held in the country in more than 4,505 communal circuits that include and group together more than 49,000 communal councils. In this sense, the state reiterated that with the of the homeland, a new direct socialist democratic phase will be entered where the people will have the option to elect without interventionist attempts of foreign nations. Also, the President Nicolás Maduro assured that the United States wants to interfere in Venezuela's internal affairs when it is not capable of solving its own social and political problems. And more on Venezuela, the president of the Electoral Chamber of the Supreme Court of the country, Caracas Rodriguez, announced that they have started a technical analysis of all the electoral material related to the elections of July 28th. Rodriguez informed that the National Electoral Council has provided all the digital and physical electoral material for the investigation process. Likewise, she pointed out that the investigation will be carried out by the best technical and specialized team until the High Court gathers the necessary evidence to certify the decision of the Venezuelan people. In addition, Rodriguez reiterated the commitment of the judiciary to impart justice in the face of the cybernetic coup of the global ultra-right denounced by the re-elected President Nicolás Maduro. And also in Venezuela, social and territorial leaders are collaborating in the public debate of the law against fascism and neo-fascism based on their own experiences of siege and threats suffered. Let's see the details with our correspondent, Leonel Retamal.
In Guatire, a city located west of Caracas, social leaders were harassed and persecuted in the days following the rejection of the election results by the extremist opposition.
It fills us with great sadness to see our neighbors with whom we walk day by day, with whom we have been working, to whom we have offered a helping hand, a hand of solidarity. And it fills us with deep sadness and pain to see our own lifelong neighbors besieging us in our own homes, shouting at us a terrible word, cursing us. So yes, that fills us with sadness to see such manifestations of hatred in our neighbors.
These
types of testimonies about violence are being compiled to contribute to the law being discussed by the Venezuelan parliament against fascism.
We will be attending to this consultation throughout today, and we will be listening to the proposals, systematizing them in order to present the report on Monday before the Domestic Policy Committee of the National Assembly. All those who have direct responsibility in the sieges, in the outrages, to all of us, the sovereign people, let them be guilty and let them assume their responsibility.
The Venezuelan prosecutor's office has been investigating the acts of violence from the outset. They have focused on arresting those responsible for the street violence and are now following the trail of masterminds. Several accusations obtained link leaders of the Venezuelan right wing with prison inmates, regional mafias, and repeat offenders, such as these criminals held in Venezuelan prisons.
And the third mission, to take people into the streets, to take the boys into the streets with guns, with whatever, to shoot them and face the National Guard, the police, and that everything was going to pay for it, financed by them, by him, by Maria Corina's team, by Leopoldo, that the money was there, that he could have the money and that he seek to get people where they could get them.
The prosecutor's office seeks to change the crimes of terrorism and homicide following the post-election violence.
The 25 people killed were at the hands of this type of criminal offenders who are detained in almost all the deaths attributable to these murders, and they will pay the maximum penalty, without a doubt.
Investigations are ongoing and further arrests and announcements are expected in the coming weeks.
teleSUR, Caracas, Venezuela.
We now move on to other topics. In Peru, several social and human rights organizations demonstrated in rejection of the government's announcements to merge the Ministry of Women and Vulnerable Populations. Social and human rights organizations held a sit-in on Thursday to reject the government's announcements to merge the Ministry of Women with the one with vulnerable populations with the Ministry of Development and Social Inclusion. For these organizations, the merger would be an attack against the rights of children, women, and vulnerable populations. In this sense, they reject their governmental announcement because if it is implemented, it could neglect sensitive and critical issues such as violence against women. In this regard, according to the state program Aurora, up to May of this year, 7,776 girls and adolescents have been victims of sexual violence.
In principle, it is a very bad measure of state reform because a government that has 5% of the approval could not carry out a process of state reform. This would mean for us women the disappearance or reduction of the budgets. They are very small. It would mean that the governing body that at this moment is the Ministry of Women, and it is in charge of placing or transversalizing the equality policies at each one of the sectors at government levels. This would also mean that each sector would do whatever it wants, and each level of government as well, and this would mean a setback in terms of the progress we have been making. But it also has to do with the second article of the Constitution that mandates the right to equality between the sexes, and this is not fulfilled in this country. We always say that what is not named does not exist. We do not consider that Dina Boluarte has any legitimacy in the country to make a reform of the state and dissolve ministries, such as the Ministry of Women, Mines, Production, Foreign Trade, and create the Ministry of Infrastructure, which I call the Ministry of Iron, Seed, and Nail, which in reality should be called only the Ministry of the Nail.
Now let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. In Haiti, at least 11 inmates of the Saint-Marc prison died in a mass jailbreak, the third so far this year in this country. Human rights organizations suggest that a riot promoted by the guards of this prison, some 100 kilometers from Port-au-Prince, the capital of the country, was the origin of this new massacre. The police have limited themselves to confirming the number of deaths and that the events took place around 6 a.m. Some of the escapees were recaptured in the town of Arcaye, where the population apparently cooperated with the uniformed. Haitian prisons are severely overcrowded and suffer from a severe lack of water and food, as well as the most basic hygienic conditions. In In Colombia, delegates from the 9 countries that make up the indigenous peoples of the Amazon basin met in the capital to establish criteria and commitments to protect biodiversity in their territories and communities in preparation for the UN Climate Change Conference to be held in Cali. Our correspondent Hernan Tobar has the details. Let's see.
En la capital colombiana, los pueblos indígenas pertenecientes
In the Colombian capital, the indigenous people belonging to the Amazon basin held the first international meeting of native people on the road to CBD. 9 delegates from the countries that make up this region and the representative from Colombia, Brazil, Ecuador, Bolivia, Venezuela, Guyana, Suriname, and Peru, as well as state entities from the host country, were present.
igual que entidades estatales del país anfitrión.
Nosotros hablamos de ampliación de resguardos.
We talk about the expansion of indigenous reserves, that legal security to maintain the balance of nature. There are some very important issues of direct funding for indigenous people who care for and protect the territory to be able to talk about biodiversity at the national, international, and global level. There are some bets that's going to order to protect the territory, protect the environment, and protect biodiversity.
El territorio, proteger el medio ambiente, proteger la biodiversidad.
Los pueblos indígenas son clave para la protección.
Native people are key to the protection of biodiversity and the fight to combat climate change and preserve the ecological balance in the planet. The Amazon basin alone is home to more than 500 indigenous people who are in permanent struggle for the preservation of the so-called lungs of the world, which is why it is necessary for them to be heard and participate in social, ecological, and climate policies.
Políticas sociales, ecológicas y climáticas.
Nosotros, tanto de los pueblos, mi pueblo y otros pueblos de Amazon.
For us, my people and other peoples of the Amazon, we are aware of our contributions, but many times the states and the governments do not recognize this type of contributions, that for millennia, with our knowledge, our connectivity with Mother Earth, with nature, we have contributed, and that is one of the strong demands of these great dialogues at the global level. But we must never lose sight of the right to life, human rights. The rights of indigenous people are not negotiable.
El derecho a la vida, los derechos humanos, los derechos de los pueblos indígenas, que no es negociable.
Espacios como estos
Spaces such as this serve to promote environmental protection policies. They also serve to reflect on the conditions of indigenous people, historical victims of violence and colonialism.
Todavía el colonialismo existe, pero
Colonialism still exists, but in another form. It is now the transnational companies that have many important resources and are installed in a territory from one day to another and already have the legal security that the peoples have been demanding for more than 20 years. A situation so complicated and difficult, but also we indigenous people have always said we are not against the development of private companies, as long as they respect the collective rights of indigenous people.
los derechos colectivos que tienen los pueblos indígenas.
representantes de los pueblos indígenas de la
Representative of the native people of the Amazon basin signed an agreement that will be taken to the largest biodiversity conference, CBD COP16, to be held next October in Colombia, bringing their proposals for the protection and defense of the biodiverse territories and lungs of the world.
Hernán Darío Tobar Gaitán, teleSUR, Bogotá, Colombia.
We now move on to other topics. On Saturday, Indonesia held Independence Day celebrations in Nusantara, the future capital that will replace sinking and polluted Jakarta. Indonesia declared independence in 1945 after more than 3 centuries of Dutch rule and at the end of Japanese occupation during World War II. This year's celebration were the first official act to be held in Nusantara and included a prayer, a military parade, and the attendance of President Joko Widodo, his successor Prabowo Subianto, who will take office in October, as well as cabinet ministers and military brass in an effort to reassure potential investors about the viability of the $32 billion project. The new capital was due to be inaugurated on Indonesia's Independence Day, but construction has been delayed. Environmentalists have also warned against building a metropolis in one of the world's largest tracts of rainforest, home to orangutans, long-nosed monkeys, and clouded leopards. Nusantara is being carved out of dense jungle in Borneo, home to the Samboja Lestari Orangutan Rehabilitation Center. The government has promised not to move the sanctuary, and the foundation that runs it says it will continue to manage the site despite concerns about potential environmental damage from rapid urban development. And Hong Kong celebrated the birth of its first giant panda twins on August 15th, delivered by Ying Ying, who became the oldest panda to give birth for the first time at nearly 19 years old. The cubs, a male and a female, were born after a 5-month pregnancy, with the female weighing 122 grams and the male 112 grams. This event is significant as giant pandas are notoriously difficult to breed, and Ying Ying had previously struggled with pregnancy. The twins are currently receiving round-the-clock care due to their delicate condition. Hong Kong's chief executive, John Lee, remarked on the special occasion coinciding with the 75th anniversary of the People's Republic of China. Another pair of pandas is expected to arrive in Hong Kong next month. And we have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English. There you will be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back from the south. In Palestine, massacres by genocidal Israeli troops continue. At least 15 people were killed in the Zawayda Refugee Camp. The Zionist troops bombed tents full of people, most of them hungry and thirsty women and children. The Israeli fighter planes launched 3 attacks at the surrounding of the camps, where the Palestinians that they themselves had displaced there, with the promise that it was a safe area, are taking refuge. These attacks in the center of Gaza, in addition to new orders for massive evacuation in the north and south of the Palestinian enclave, are taking place while the so-called international community is concentrating its hopes on a ceasefire. And more on Palestine, the Hamas movement denounced Israel for involving the United States in the confrontation with Iran. The head of foreign relations of the Palestinian resistance movement, Hamas, Bassem Naim, warned that Israel is looking for the United States to fight on its side in a confrontation with Iran after Washington deployed significant military forces in the Middle East to defend Israel. In turn, he pointed out that the head of the Israeli government plans to continue escalating the situation in the region, particularly in the Gaza Strip, until the next presidential elections in the United States that are scheduled for November 5th. And the United Nations organization demanded a 7-day humanitarian ceasefire to manage the polio crisis and vaccinate children in Gaza against the disease. The World Health Organization and the United Nations Children's Fund renewed Friday their call for a humanitarian ceasefire in the Gaza Strip for 7 days to allow the launch of a mass polio vaccination campaign scheduled for late August and early September. The campaign aims to vaccinate 640,000 children under the age of 10 against type 2 polio, according to a statement issued by the 2 international organizations. They announced their demand to carry out the vaccination campaign after finding samples of polio, which can cause paralysis, in the sewage of Gaza, and after several children showed symptoms compatible with the infectious disease. In the Middle East, the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas rejected the new conditions for a proposal presented by Israel after a day of negotiations that was held in Qatar. In an official statement, Hamas defended a complete ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and the withdrawal of Israeli troops from the enclave, as well as a regular return of the displaced and an unrestricted prisoner exchange agreement. This is in addition to the statements on Thursday where Hamas refused to participate in the negotiations and reported that they would remain in protest after the assassination by Israel of his key chief negotiator in late July. In addition, it is important to point out that the negotiation comes when the number of Palestinians killed in the Zionist escalation against Gaza has already exceeded the 40,000. And meanwhile, in Sana'a, capital of Yemen, thousands of citizens demonstrate in the streets in support of the Palestinian people. During the day, demonstrators condemned the genocidal acts of Israel against the Palestinian territory and the increasing escalation of tensions in the region. The mobilizations also extended to different squares nationwide and showed their support to the struggle of the Palestinian resistance movements. And we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and also on TikTok. For TeleSUR English, my name is Berendira Santos. Thank you for watching.